William Steve's 5-year-old son bounded through the door, laughing, completely unaware that the innocent words he'd just spoken were impossible, because Steve only had one child. What started as a simple question soon ripped open a decades-old secret, buried deep in the past, and standing at the school gates was a woman who looked exactly like William's dead wife. The truth was waiting, but was he ready to face it? Dive into today's mind-bending mystery, and don't forget to tell us where you're listening from. The apartment was still half in boxes, but the sunlight didn't care. It poured in anyway, painting stripes of gold across the bare floors. Steve leaned against the doorframe, watching as Mavis, his 5-year-old whirlwind of energy, wove between towers of cardboard, his sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. "Dad!" Mavis skidded to a stop, holding up a faded photograph. The edges were worn soft from too many little fingers. In it, a woman with wind-tousled hair grinned at the camera, the ocean stretching behind her. "Can I put Mommy's picture next to my bed?" Steve's chest tightened, but he nodded. "Yeah, buddy. She should be right there with you." Then came Grandma Fiona, part hurricane, part heart, arms loaded with Tupperware of cookies and an unshakable sense of how things ought to be. She zeroed in on the mantel like a general surveying a battlefield. "This," she declared, setting down a framed wedding photo, "is where Cassidy stays, front and center." As they unpacked, Fiona spun stories like threads of gold, Cassidy forgetting her shoes at the altar, Cassidy laughing until she snorted at bad jokes, Cassidy humming lullabies even when the pain made her voice shake. Mavis listened, wide-eyed, as if collecting pieces of a mother he could barely remember. "She never let the dark win," Steve murmured, more to himself than anyone. The next morning, Mavis tucked the beach photo carefully into his backpack. "Mommy's coming to school too," he whispered, patting the pocket like it held something precious. At the kindergarten door, Miss Keisha beamed at them. "Mavis, I've got glitter and glue with your name on it. Want to see?" Steve watched his son march inside, brave and small. Just before turning the corner, Mavis's hand drifted to his bag, fingers brushing where the photo lay hidden. And in that moment, Steve made a silent vow. No more goodbyes, only love, only carrying her forward. Because some shadows weren't meant to fade, they were meant to walk beside you. The night air hung still as Steve smoothed the blankets over Mavis. The glow of the nightlight caught the determined set of his son's jaw, so like Cassidy's when she had something important to say. "Dad," Mavis whispered, fingers clutching the worn edge of his dinosaur comforter, "I have a sister." Steve's hands stilled. Ice water flooded his veins. "Buddy, what do you mean?" "Her name's Katie." Mavis's eyes were wide, earnest. "She's got my eyes, and my nose. Miss Keisha says it's unusual." The last word came out carefully, like he'd practiced it. Steve forced a chuckle that died in his throat. Mavis wasn't smiling. That expression, the slight furrow between his brows, the way his mouth pressed into a line, was Cassidy's through and through. "Maybe." Mavis traced the edge of his pillowcase. "Mommy sent her to me." Steve arrived at the school 20 minutes early the next morning, coffee forgotten in his cup holder. Through the classroom window, children milled about like colorful atoms until one small figure made his breath catch. A girl. Same chestnut hair that curled at the ends, same way of standing with her weight on one foot. When she turned to grab crayons, Steve's knees nearly buckled. It was Mavis's profile, down to the slight upturn of the nose. The doorframe bit into his palm as he gripped it for balance. "Mr. William." Miss Keisha's voice came from behind him, softer than usual. "We should talk." The principal's office smelled of lemon cleaner and anxiety. Steve's fingers drummed an uneven rhythm on his knees as Miss Keisha slid a folder across the desk. "Katie started last month," she said carefully. But when Mavis arrived, she tapped 2 dates on a spreadsheet. Same birthday. Steve's vision tunneled. "They finish each other's sentences," Miss Keisha continued, "knew each other's favorite colors instantly. When they met, it was like..." She searched for the word, then let the silence speak. The air between them thickened with the unthinkable. Outside, children's laughter floated through the window, 2 voices rising above the rest, perfectly in sync. Steve's hands shook as he gripped the school gate. The afternoon sun burned his neck, but he barely noticed. Every nerve in his body was taut, waiting. Then the world stopped. There she was. Cassidy. Not a memory, not a ghost. Right there in flesh and blood, tucking that stubborn strand of hair behind her ear, just like she always had. The simple gesture hit Steve like a punch to the chest. His legs gave out. The concrete scraped his palms as he caught himself, but he barely felt it. "Daddy?" Mavis's small hand touched his shoulder. "Why are you on the ground?" Nearby, Katie tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, that man looks sick." With trembling fingers, Mavis held out the worn beach photo. "You look like my mommy." The woman, Cassidy, not Cassidy, took the picture as if handling something fragile. Her breath hitched when she saw the image. Her thumb traced the smiling her face with a tenderness that spoke of deep, wordless recognition. When she looked up, her eyes, Cassidy's eyes, darted between Mavis and the photo, then back to Steve. In their depths swirled a storm of confusion, wonder, and something else. Something like remembrance. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions. Around them, the world kept moving. Children laughing, parents chatting, but for Steve, everything had narrowed to this impossible moment. The air in the teacher's office hung thick with unspoken questions as the woman, Natasha Brown, clutched the photograph with trembling fingers. Her knuckles whitened around the edges of the faded image, her breath shallow. "I never knew," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All these years, I had a sister." Steve watched the realization dawn in her eyes. The same hazel flecks, the same slight crinkle at the corners when she frowned. Just like Cassidy's. "Miss." Keisha cleared her throat gently. "The children? Their birthdays?" "October 12th, Natasha murmured, her gaze drifting to where Mavis and Katie sat cross-legged on the classroom rug, already deep in shared laughter. A shudder ran through her. "I need to talk to my mother." Bethley's hands shook as she poured tea, the china clinking softly. The scent of chamomile did nothing to ease the tension coiling in the room. Steve placed the photo on the coffee table. The woman in the picture smiled up at them, frozen in time. Bethley's breath hitched. "That's Cassidy." Her fingers hovered over the image, not quite touching, as if afraid it might dissolve. The truth spilled out in fractured sentences. A story of youth, of impossible choices, of a love fractured by power and shame. "I was 22, Bethley began, her voice paper-thin. "He was older, married. When the twins were born, he gave me an ultimatum." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I could only keep one." Steve's stomach turned. "You just gave her away?" Bethley's eyes glistened. "I thought I was doing what was best. Natasha was stronger. She'd survive. Cassidy, she was so small. I thought she'd have a better chance with someone else." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I spent years searching. When I finally worked up the courage, it was too late. The agency had shut down. The records were gone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Every October 12th, I'd light 2 candles. One for Natasha, one for the daughter I let go." Silence settled over them, heavy and suffocating. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the distant sound of children's laughter. 2 voices, perfectly in sync. Bethley's arthritic fingers trembled as she placed the old shoebox on the table. Dust swirled in the sunlight as she lifted the lid, revealing yellowed hospital bracelets, 2 tiny knit blankets, one pink, one blue, and a faded Polaroid of newborn twins nestled together. A heavy silence filled the room. Katie and Mavis stood shoulder to shoulder, their small hands unconsciously intertwined. Natasha's breath hitched as she traced the edge of the blue blanket. All these years. "I'll never really know her," she whispered, a tear splashing onto the brittle photograph. Mavis tilted his head, studying his aunt's face, so like his mother's when she used to read him bedtime stories. "But you can know me," he said with the simple wisdom of children. "I remember lots. I can tell you how she made pancakes into dinosaur shapes." The air seemed to shift. Katie pressed against her mother's side. "This is good, right? Now we're like," she scrunched her nose, searching for the word, "a bigger family." Natasha's watery gaze met Steve's. A silent question passed between them. Steve gave the smallest nod. The backyard smelled of charcoal and fresh-cut grass. Mavis and Katie raced through sprinklers, their shrieks of laughter bouncing off the fence. Steve turned burgers on the grill while Natasha arranged corn on the cob, just the way Cassidy used to, with extra butter and paprika. "Photo time," Natasha called, waving the instant camera Bethley had gifted them. "Under the magnolia tree." The children came running, damp and breathless. They stood beneath the blossoms, holding a hand-drawn family tree between them, branches stretching to include Cassidy's portrait, Bethley's shaky signature and the words Est 2023 in Mavis's careful printing. The camera flashed. As the photo developed, Steve studied the faces around him, the way Natasha's laugh lines mirrored Cassidy's, how Mavis had started tucking his hair behind his ear, just like his aunt. The ghost of his wife lived in these moments, in these people. Natasha squeezed his shoulder. She'd be happy, you know. Steve watched as Bethley taught the kids how to make daisy chains, her hands guiding theirs with patient care. The late afternoon sun gilded everything in gold. The grass, the lemonade glasses, the tears on Bethley's cheeks as Katie called her grandma for the first time. Somewhere beyond the fence, wind chimes sang. Steve could almost imagine it was Cassidy's laughter, weaving through their new beginning. The world kept turning beyond their little backyard. Cars honked in the distance. Neighbors argued about misplaced packages. The ice cream truck played its tinny melody 3 streets over. But here, beneath the sprawling oak tree where fireflies danced like living constellations, time seemed to hold its breath. Steve and Natasha sat shoulder to shoulder on the dew-damp grass long after the children had fallen asleep. Above them, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a spilled jar of glitter, the kind of night that made you speak in whispers as if anything louder might shatter the magic. Natasha tilted her head back, letting the starlight wash over her face. Cassidy's face, Steve realized with a familiar ache. "Do you think," she began, then hesitated, fingers plucking at a blade of grass. "Do you think she sees him? Knows he's happy?" Steve didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph, the one Mavis carried everywhere. The edges were soft as velvet now from all the handling. In the moonlight, Cassidy's smile seemed to glow. "I think," he said slowly, tracing the curve of her cheek with his thumb, "she knew this would happen before we did." As if on cue, a streak of silver split the sky, a shooting star burning so bright it left an after-image on their eyelids. Natasha gasped. Steve laughed, the sound rusty with disuse but real. And far away, or maybe closer than they thought, a woman with Mavis's eyes and Natasha's smile watched them through the veil between worlds. She didn't need to whisper, "I told you so." The way Katie was teaching Mavis to whistle, the way Natasha hummed Cassidy's favorite song while doing dishes, the way Steve finally slept through the night, these were her words. The stars winked. The fireflies pulsed. And for the first time in forever, the night didn't feel quite so lonely. What would you do if someone you loved, someone who was supposed to be gone, suddenly reappeared? How well do we really know the people closest to us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories.